emerging risks and all the digital transformation that has happened, right? So I'm sure you've heard COVID was the biggest stimulant, accelerant of digital transformation, right? CIOs had been planning for the last 10 years. We will do digital transformation. They used to go to the board used to like, we don't understand this, get the hell out of my boardroom, right? And so the CIOs used to go back and run their SAP in the data center. They used to have like, you're going to sit at this place and we're going to protect it using a firewall. And everybody's like, I don't know what the firewall is, but it's running somewhere. And that's what had been going on. And COVID hit March 2020. It's been 3 years. Can you imagine? Right? April 1st, when we were hiding in our room and sitting, we couldn't see this day. And look around you, right? We're celebrating getting together and enjoying each other's company. But the last 3 years facilitated the biggest digital transformation we've ever seen, right? We literally, I've had clients that took the desktop from the client's desk and told the client, okay, come on Thursday at 8 o'clock. And two guys in full PPE would take the desktop and the monitor, go downstairs and give it to them, put it in the trunk. They wouldn't talk, they wouldn't touch each other, and the desktop used to go home. Right? That's the kind of stuff that's happened. And imagine the software, the technology, the firewall that protected that desktop was now out in the open, at home, in somebody's house, where the kids were playing Minecraft, and all kinds of malware was floating around at home, and the work desktop was sitting completely unprotected in that environment. And we were expecting the employee to work 9 hours from home with that, right? So I've got a whole team over here that facilitated that, right? Implemented that, accelerated that, and then we've got the folks from FBI that started getting calls of all of the fraud and all of the hacking and ransomware that started happening because so much unprotected stuff was out in the open. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and I'm going to ask each of you to do a 3 to 5 minute self-introduction and how you folks dealt with the accelerated digital transformation, some personal anecdotes, and I think that's a good way to kick this off. I'm going to encourage all of you not to hold back. These guys are big boys.
Just don't throw anything hard.
Just don't throw anything. That's it. You can heckle all you want. You can ask all you want. Please don't throw anything.
No food.
These guys are delicate, strong men. So, all right, go for it, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Sanjay. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
So Mark Smith, I'm president of our insurance practice. But having said that, I've spent 35 years in IT consulting, systems integration. I was with Ernst & Young, IBM for a number of years. Also been a CIO at Farmers Insurance. I was head of operations and technology for the Americas region for Zurich. That was about a $5 billion budget and P&L. So quite a bit of experience on the systems integration side, and happy to be here to talk to you about this because I think, as Sanjay kind of pointed out, I'll say the old way, but unfortunately it's kind of still the new way, or the current way that people think about security and cybersecurity and protection is really around more internet, around their networks. It's around monitoring and detection, not as much around prevention. And a key area of prevention is really around your applications portfolio. How many of you use a cloud provider today? How many of you have, web applications, mobile applications, managed service providers and consultants? How many of you maybe have offshore programmers? Use third-party APIs for data and partnerships, right? That could be part of your supply chain, distribution partners, right? We all probably do. How many of us have Alexa in our house? That's the scary one.
Right.
But we'll get to that. But the point being, I think, as Sanjay said, there's been a tremendous acceleration of digital transformation, which means all those things. People moving to the cloud, using third-party APIs and providers, using SaaS applications, right? So our environment has become very, very distributed, probably more than it has been. Yes?
And it has people in it.
And it has people in it.
Right.
People are the weakest link.
That's right.
Well, and so you think about our hybrid and our virtual work environments today, right? People are working from home, working with their laptops, hopefully working with their, company-provided laptops or desktops. And more systems development, software development, we have people working offshore. So, the point being is that, the level of, distribution of our work environment and our systems has significantly increased, which has increased our vulnerability. And, one of the areas that I've spent a lot of time, and we spend a lot of time, is working with our clients on how do we protect from an applications portfolio standpoint ourselves, right? Because that's one of the greatest vulnerabilities, and that's something that many of us can't control. And it's interesting if you go into, and I've worked for some very, very, very large companies, financial services companies. Where is the CISO and where's the security group? They're not there during application development. They are there negotiating the MSAs for any of our COTS, any new software products, any of our cloud providers, but generally they're not there in the application development process, and they need to be there. We need that expertise, because at the point at which we're doing requirements, we should be looking at, and are we using third parties? Are we going to do this on the cloud? Are we going to use offshore developers? We should be looking at the vulnerabilities right then when we're doing the requirements and we're architecting that solution, right? The second place is, just as all requirements definition feeds testing. We do a lot of integration testing, and that includes third-party providers, right? We'll typically do our integration testing end-to-end. We'll do them between on-prem apps and our cloud apps. But that's where we need to also be doing our security testing. Testing for basically the solutions that we discussed with our CISO and our security team to basically harden our applications, harden that architecture, that distributed architecture. We should be testing for that as part of our QA testing and just as another one of our test events. And similarly, when we're going in and we're doing our maintenance, right? I mean, that needs to become part of our application development framework. And more companies are looking at that today, I think, but we're still not there yet as part of that. And often we'll get the question from our clients, well, I already got a bunch of systems I put out there in the last 2 years as part of COVID and responding to the digital transformation. Are those secure? What do I do? And there are providers like Oz, like 7x24. There are basically vulnerability tools out there today that you can use to assess the vulnerability of your applications that you have out there. And that's something that I think is starting to get some attention, but it still doesn't have the level of urgency that it really needs to have. So I think, if I were to leave you with one key message tonight, you've really got to look at your application development and your maintenance process, your standards, right? And that is where, part of your protection of your data, of your assets, of your customers' data, really begins as right then and there, right? And engaging your security team, or, if you have a CISO that works for you, making sure that they're getting engaged as part of that process, right, and helping you identify where and how to protect your applications. So,
Right.
Manny?
You want to build on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody, welcome to this session. We certainly appreciate you coming in tonight. I'm Manny Ramos. I'm the Chief Solutions Officer at Oz Digital Consulting, and I'm responsible for all global technology practices at Oz. I have 30 years of experience in digital consulting as well as in technology. And
Manny, I don't think your mic is on. Quick look here, sorry.
yeah, it's on.
Only 30 years? I thought you were older than me.
Yeah.
Now I'm bummed.
It's not working.
So I hope you heard that I am Manny Ramos, the Chief Solutions Officer at Oz Digital Consulting. I have 30 years of experience in technology and consulting. And I've held CIO and CISO roles at GE, Modular Space, Reson, Trellens, and Aptitude Solutions. I also am a startup mentor at the Tampa Bay Wave Incubator. So I'm looking forward to the discussion here. And one of the things that you pointed out people, and I wanted to give you one metric. Verizon did a study and they found that 82% of all the breaches are due to human element factors. Just let that sink in for a second, because we focus so much on technology, prevention, et cetera, but there's a great deal that takes place right here at the human factor level. And we need to account for that. We need to be prepared. One other area that to go alongside what Mark just alluded to in terms of the CISO, the role of the CISO. We tend to find the CISO when we work with our clients, and I call it the office of no. Security providers and security personnel tend to say no just at the outset of any request. And because of that, most of the time they're not brought into the table when projects are coming in or when there are initiatives that are going to take place at the organization. And that leads to shadow IT, that leads to not involvement at the front end. For example, like Mark alluded in terms of application security. There's a great deal of projects that take place without CISO's involvement. So we need to be able to say yes, but, and have that mentality in order to be able to get at the table. So I encourage you from a security perspective to make sure that you're looking at the human element, the human factors. And I'll give you some more facts later on about the human element associated with security. Because again, we focus so much on security and prevention, but we also have to focus on preparedness and education. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Brian?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Waterman. I'm a special agent with the FBI here in the Miami division. And one of the things that I was always told when you go into a meeting or you go and you're meeting with people that you're working with, make sure you're never the smartest person in the room. No problem here, folks.
You're much too kind.
But what I'm here to talk to you a little bit about is we want to let you know what the FBI can do for you when these things happen. And one of the things that the FBI over the years has done a really good job of trying to do with our private sector folks is we want to be out here in events like this, and we want to let you know who we are, how we exist, and then the information that we can share with all of you. We have a number of different organizations in which the FBI shares information. Currently, I am the FBI InfraGard coordinator for the Miami division. And what InfraGard is, it's a group of individuals that are out there in the private sector that join an organization to share information. Because the FBI is really good at a few things. We're really good at finding bad people that are doing bad things and putting them in jail. We're really, really good at that. We've got guns, we've got rams, we've got tactical equipment, we've got handcuffs, we've got really smart people that can plan a great arrest. But here's some stuff we're not that great about. What is the emerging technology of tomorrow? What are you all facing in terms of your biggest cyber risk? Because we are a reactive agency. We figure stuff out after it happens. When I started in the FBI quite a few years ago, my mentor told me that we were history writers. We write the story about what happened, and then we bring it to court, and we tell the story to 12 jurors who decide whether or not this person committed a crime or not. That's what we're really, really good at, and we've got some great people about it. We've got really smart people, too, that can figure out some of these cyber crimes as they're taking place. But here's what we don't do. We don't come into your company and go, holy cow, you got hacked or your computer got taken over. Hold on a second, let me grab the FBI card and we're gonna stick it in your system and now it works again. If that actually exists, that person wouldn't work for the FBI anymore, they'd have their own company.
Right.
But if we're not part of your process or we're not part of your plan on who to call when something happens, then that person who's doing something to your company is never going to be punished, never going to be caught, and they're going to continue to do this. And part of our private sector outreach program is we want to share that information that we learn with everybody else. Because if there is a new way that somebody's committing cyber crimes, we want to share that with everybody so that the one victim that we found doesn't become 100, doesn't become 1,000, doesn't become 1,000,000. And the only way we can do that is to work with all of you to get that information and to send it back out to the folks that really need it. And I just want to leave one caveat. Look, if you do share stuff with us and you're working with us, we're not going to say, hey folks, IBM just said that they got hacked today and be careful about A, B, and C. That's not what we do. What we do is we share the information, that's important, but we work the case. So if you are hacked or you do have an intrusion or you have a victim of ransomware, call the FBI. We are going to come in, we are going to work that case, and we're going to work really, really hard to put the person in jail that did that to you.
Let me add to what Brian just said. So he talked about InfraGard. So InfraGard is a public-private partnership with FBI, and there are a group of folks by membership. They're invited to participate, and then there's a board. So I sit on the board of the local chapter of the InfraGard. I'm the sector chief for IT, so I facilitate all IT-related things that are. Correct me. There are 18 critical infrastructure designated by the government, and IT is one of them. So we have worked, or I have personally worked with FBI. Whenever there's a ransomware case, we have brought it to FBI's attention, and they will basically help in matters of what is it and how does it impact. And so they will help you. They're not going to, like he said, they're not going to come in and fix it. They will definitely help in correlating the information regarding that actual ransomware attack. So great conversation. Please jump in if you have any questions. And going back to what Mark just said about application.
I have a question.
Sure, go for it.
So I'm going to follow up on something that Mark said. And I think, Mark, you really talked about cybersecurity more from the solutions provided perspective. And there is a solutions consumer perspective. And so any one of you, not just you, but any one of you that can talk about what's the difference of doing cybersecurity from the solutions perspective, because the standards are a lot more rigid for solutions providers. But the people that consume these services, and they have to adhere to some set of rules. What can they do if they don't have that rigidness in their rules to mitigate risk?
Yeah, that's a great great question, and that is something that, you know, as a service provider, we're up against, you know, quite a bit, because, you know, we're working with clients that, you know, we can advise them, you know, what we think are the right things to do and the best practices, but, you know, they can choose to say no,
Say no, the office of no.
or say yes. And I would say often, because there's fixed budget, there's a lot of aggressiveness on timelines, you know, for delivery, that if they're not already educated and aware, the answer may typically be no. And then it kind of depends on what our role is. If we are a member of a team that, you know, is the client team and our team, you know, we have less influence. If, on the other hand, we are truly the solution provider, we have bid to provide a, like in in insurance, we're saying, we will deliver to you an end-to-end underwriting intelligent workflow solution. Then we tend to have a lot more control over the methodology, right? And that's where I think, I'm not just talking, it's a good point to bring up, to, the company, but solution providers, and probably if you are contracting a solution provider, you should be asking these questions.
Right.
What is their methodology, right? For application delivery? Have they included all the things that I, mentioned in that, right? Because then we can influence that. Because I will tell you, for example, not quite the same solution we have at Oz, and that's typically because we're working more, small and middle market. But I will tell you that at IBM, negotiating with, top 50 insurance company, the MSA, 9 months. What is the biggest issue there? They want unlimited liability.
Right.
On any data breach, right? And that's just, you can't do unlimited liability. But that's how they look at, kind of managing that process, right? As opposed to engaging. So I think as a solution provider, it is part of our responsibility that we have a methodology, that our people are trained in that methodology for how we build applications, how we look at vulnerabilities before we build them, and how we include that in our testing. And often, those tend to be fixed price contracts for delivery, and therefore we have more influence over that. And that's both our responsibility today, I think, but the other issue may be liability, right? Because if you have that level of responsibility as a service provider to provide the solution, right, and you have an MSA, and there's a big breach, you could find yourself in litigation. Now, I don't know of too many situations like that yet, but I will tell you at IBM, that was a key concern of, our legal department. There's probably as many lawyers at IBM as there are programmers, but just for that reason, right? Protection. So I think that's a very important aspect of it. But at the end of the day, the client is in control of that decision,
Right.
and the best you can do is try to advise them, educate them. One of our biggest education tools was we had something like the cyber range, right? And once we got clients in there, because it's designed for the C-suite, they had a much better understanding of how big the problem and how big the risk is. Because I would say they typically don't look at applications per se as the problem. They don't understand the vulnerabilities of third-party APIs. They don't understand the importance of authentication. Another key area is use a lot of enterprise systems. How you configure those systems, what roles you put on people, what level of access you give them, read, write, access to key data, access to key files. Often that goes totally unchecked, and right there is a vulnerability, right? Legacy debt. We're called in often to, help, clients with, a migration path for a core system, vendor system. And they're shocked at, the price tag. Why? Because they're 5 versions behind. Today, you can't be there. You can't be there on legacy, on technical debt, on your infrastructure, on your hardware, on your operating systems. And that's both a pro and a con of most of your enterprise systems now are SaaS. So, the con to that is, well, you can't do all the modifications you want, right? They'll give you 3 API entry points, and all your modifications are going to be outside of that SaaS offering. The good news might be that they're going to keep that current. They're going to be doing those upgrades as they're required, And security for SaaS solutions is becoming a higher and higher priority. So that could be, a benefit of that. Hopefully that answered your question.
Manny's trying to jump in. so
Manny?
go for it,
No,
Manny.
I just want to give you a little bit of a different perspective. When organizations that are in regulated spaces like banking and what have you, they have a vendor risk management guidelines that they have to follow. And what we're finding in the areas associated with the bad actors, the threat actors, they're looking at third-party vendors. You have a banking organization, and they're looking at their third-party vendors to go ahead and enter through the bank, for example, to enter the network. In other words, they're using less sophisticated vendors to enter and do damage to organizations that are regulated. So what we find and what we tell our clients is to make absolutely certain that even though it may not be required for you, use the vendor management guidelines that regulated entities do from a risk perspective, from a security perspective. And that helps them at least have some sophistication as far as how they go about evaluating a vendor. Because the security aspect of it, typically for smaller organizations, is the last thing that they consider when they're entering into a contract with a vendor. So if they follow those guidelines, at least they have a better shot. Because we need to make absolutely certain that we recognize that that is an entry point now from a security perspective, a security threat perspective, the third-party vendors that are not having to deal with those regulations, but they are a party to an entity that is.
Manny, one point to that is, but it's not only them, because all of those third-party vendors use fourth parties.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a cascading effect. That's why I'm saying, to your point, that we need to make sure that we have vendor risk management across the board everywhere.
And I'm sure it's a flow down, right? So
Yeah.
all of the vendors and their sub-vendors are being asked to do SOC 2 compliance and ISO 27001
Right.
and different kinds of sub-compliance to prove that they have not only their coding standards, but also the data of their customers secure in their environment. You got a question?
One point, when I took cybersecurity training, they were saying if a client would say no to some particular recommendation, to document the heck out of it and say
Absolutely.
what the risks are and roll it down to what, that really helps your reliability because you've made them aware. Of course, it's their decision. But sometimes when you see it in black and white, it can change decision. That's one point. Another point I wanted to make is I work extensively as a volunteer with the Broward County school systems, and the education system is a huge target, believe it or not, for
Absolutely.
Ransomware and
Yes.
phishing and things like that. It's considered pretty vulnerable, and they're defending literally tens of thousands of attacks every day at Broward County schools. I don't think people realize how much gets fought off before one gets in. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But one vulnerability that came to pass that people would never think about as a vendor was they have these counting water fountains where it shows you how socially responsible you are, etc. Look how many bottles. That data was being sent, if they had implemented that, to a country that we're not allowed to send data to.
Right.
And I mean, it's one of those things that unless you have somebody on top of those, how would you even guess that? It's
Right.
crazy how far this goes. I mean, water fountains,
I know.
but once they're in your system, they're there. That's the problem.
The target hack was through an HVAC system, Fazio systems.
Yeah.
I think the CIO of Broward College, I think I'm looking at, I forgot your name, sir, but Tony. We were having a conversation, and I think you told me that you saw millions of threats every day to your.
Yeah, so, somebody that's on microphone. So, I'm the CIO of Broward College, one of the largest colleges in the country. We see between 1.2 and 1.5 million attacks on our firewalls a day.
A day.
And we block up to 75% of all email traffic, both to students and to employees, because that 75% is all marked bad.
Right.
So think about that. We're only delivering roughly 25% of the
25%.
emails. And that's a godsend, because that is the number one vulnerability right now, is phishing, those type of things that are coming in through email. The other thing that we do that actually has mitigated a lot of that, not just the technology and you know, detonating those emails and sandboxes and all that other good stuff, is actual cyber awareness training. That was the biggest change in our environment, was when we made cyber awareness training mandatory for every single employee, and they have to do it every single year. And we actually saw the amount of quote unquote bad clicks go down dramatically after that. And they're you're talking about an hour's worth of your time of doing cyber training, and it works wonders and it works wonders at Broward College. I'm sure it works wonders at just about any other organization.
Let me give you some facts around that because I think it's important. Ransomware was extremely successful in 2022. There's a group called Lipsys. I don't know if you heard of them. Lipsys? If you haven't, you should look them up. Also another one called Conti. They have disbanded. But they had 900 successful ransomware events in 2022. By 2024, it is projected that there's going to be $40 billion worth of ransomware attacks in the world. What is the threat vector that they use the most, and the most successful one? Anybody want to take a guess? Phishing. Phishing. Now, I read a study that says that 97% of the population does not discern a phishing email yet, even with all the training. 97%.
Hey guys, my name is Patrick Yalawa. I'm the CEO of Complete Care IT, so we're in the field. And we say people is the biggest challenge, but I want to take it to another level, right? It's getting people to buy in.
Right.
A lot of our clients,
Right.
they want protection, but they don't want to be inconvenient.
Right.
They want protection with zero inconvenience whatsoever. So multiple factor authentication, MFA, is a game changer.
Right.
When I saw this technology, I thought everyone is going to want this. It's like, who would want this?
Right.
I can't tell you how many phone calls I have to get involved as a CEO to try to explain to another CEO that we need to do this because they don't want the inconvenience of having the multi-factor
You bet.
authentication. And they're asking me, how do we get rid of the multi-factor? I'm saying, dude, the multi-factor is what's protecting us. We get rid of that, there's no protection. So, any feedback from you guys? How do you deal with that? How do you provide the protection without saying I can't remove the inconvenience?
I know that it's going to sound basic, but what I found in my experience is education with consequence. So, for example, I had the CEO of Checkers, ex-CEO of Checkers, who got compromised, his laptop, and he was just like what you described. And as soon as that happened, and I'm not suggesting that that's going to be the case every time, but what I'm suggesting to you is that I use that as an example, as I'm doing today, to tell people that there's a consequence to not being secure, and it's reputational in nature. So we were able to catch the situation at hand with him very early on, but that could have been a massive problem for that organization and for that CEO. So what I do is I use stories like that, you know, with a little bit more detail and consequence to it, to say multi-factor authentication is absolutely a pain. There's no doubt. But just imagine the consequence if you get compromised. And here's what happened to this individual. And that's when I use these stories. Because that's the only way that I've been able to get through the message that says security is going to be key for you reputationally. It's not technically. It's reputation that you're saving. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what I have used.
I have a
I'm
quick
sorry, go
follow-up on that. Why is it then that if we have to use multi-factor authentication at a bank, we don't complain?
That's
when
right.
we
Yeah, I
have
was
to
gonna
use
say that.
multi-factor authentication in some of the places we do. So is it, are we dealing with psychology here, and that's an element of how do we portray this? Because I think, honestly, truthfully, I think as professionals, sometimes we do a lousy job at explaining to people why we do what we do. And,
Absolutely.
And the effect that it creates is, I just don't want to do it. But
Right.
I'm going to go to my bank and I'm going to do it. And if they tell me to jump off a cliff, to get my money, I'll do it too. So what's the idea here?
What I'm finding is precisely what I said, is education. I know that we do cybersecurity training, like the CIO of Broward County alluded to, but I don't think we do enough, and I don't think it's consequential enough. I know that it takes time, it is a hassle to have to do it, but we have to educate folks to do so, and we have to educate them not just on the premise of cybersecurity, but the preparedness that is required. What happens to you if all of a sudden your identity is compromised? So we talked about identity compromise, but we don't go through the stories of people that have to go through 16 months worth of trials and tribulations to get their ID back, et cetera, et cetera. So the only thing that I have found that works is that education with consequence.
Education and storytelling.
Right.
Education and storytelling. They're going back to, if the bank is not going to disable it for you, then have you thought about that? Why is the bank doing and Mr. CEO, you have the most important information on your laptop, and your laptop is the most vulnerable. So if you click on a phishing email, we can turn off MFA and make sure, like this lady said, make sure we document it and create a risk register.
Right.
So you can't turn around and tell you, hey, you disabled it and that's why I got hacked. So I think there's a way to sort of manage this, and we are seeing this over and over again. But education and storytelling is the key.
Let me give you one more
You're-
fact. I'm sorry,
Real-
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, I agree with you 100%. But in many financial services, because you're dealing with people's investments, you're dealing with money, and your consumer has awareness of that, right? And are probably much more willing to go through that authentication process. However, outside of that industry sector, it's a customer experience issue. So now you're dealing with marketing, you're dealing with the sales funnel, you're dealing with the perception that it's impacting the customer experience, and therefore it's impacting your P&L. Now, having said that, often it's not measured. However, it's just a gut feeling. So helping your customers understand that, well, let's really see. Let's do A/B testing, right? I mean, and often if you have a web sales funnel, direct to consumer, B2B sales funnel, they're doing some level of A/B testing. So do some level of A/B testing and see whether or not it really impacts the customer experience to the degree that you're losing customers, you're not closing sales, that sort of thing. But my experience is I've typically had to go up against the CMO who maybe doesn't understand, to Manny's point, what is the real risk, if we just have one big event, how many customers are you going to lose?
But I think the consumer is getting educated. In our experience, the consumer is getting educated, right? With the ID fraud and ID theft that they're going through, they are starting to figure out, okay, did I really get a UPS package for which I'm getting this email or text, and should I click on it, right? So there is slow and painful awareness, but I think that pain is driving the consumer to agree to some of these controls and restrictions we're putting in place. Make sure you have MFA, make sure you're encrypting your laptop, and there's a backup of it, right? So those are some of the things that is starting to automatically happen. I've been given the 5-minute warning over here, so we can sit over here and talk hours and hours and hours about it. So I'm going to basically see if we can go back to our FBI speaker, and he can provide some light and give some wisdom as to, based on some of the cases that they are dealing with or they have adjudicated, what would their advice be? What should the company do, and what should the consumers do?
So there's some basic pieces of advice, and the FBI is not coming out here to tell you, here's what you need to do to make your company safe. But Mark and I were actually talking a little bit about it before, and I think it's pretty simple. And we do this too. Like, the FBI is not a very trusting organization. we have a lot of very, very important information that if it were to get out, might be found in someone's garage, and that would be bad. might be found in someone's house, and that's bad. So, regardless of how you feel about any political party, classified information being leaked out to the general public is bad. And we take great steps to make sure that our data is secure. Our data is so secure that if I wanted to get on my phone or get on my laptop, I cannot access it from the internet. I must go inside of a building that has a computer system that's hardwired inside of our building. And that is the only way that I can access our classified information. So that's how the FBI deals with its important stuff. We don't allow that to be accessed over the internet. That's why you're finding documents and not computer records, because that's not how we get information back and forth. My advice to all of you is, what are you doing with your secret classified documents that make your company money, your client lists, the proprietary information that makes you all unique? You need to have a system, and you need to have a plan if that system gets hacked. So I don't know what that plan needs to be, but there's some smart people in this room that can help you with what that plan is, but you need to have it, and you need to follow it. Because, yeah, great plans out there, and you need to test it, make sure it works. Like Dan Gaitan in the back of the room is also with the FBI. We get tested pretty regularly. We get these emails that come out, and they want you to click on this thing. We're all about 75% passing, 25% not.
Right.
And that's the nature, and we're not exactly the most trusting group, but what you need to be concerned with is that last minute, oh my gosh, something just came in, it makes sense, I'm at the end of my day, will your employee, will your person, will you click on that email? Will you do something that's going to compromise your business? And I'm going to give you 3 quick stories that I've gotten in the last 2 weeks. And I'm not the cyber guy, but this is what I got in the last 3 weeks. Number 1, former FBI agent, all of their social media has been compromised. Yeah, no big deal, right? Unless, of course, an FBI agent or a former FBI agent is out there advocating for things that are unconstitutional. That's bad. That's number 1. I got that call. Number 2, I got a call from a company on December 30th, needed to wire transfer $6 million out, and got the email that said, hey, don't wire it to this company, don't wire it to here, wire it somewhere else. And what they do, December 30th, I think whatever that Friday was, maybe it was the 29th, at 4 o'clock, everybody's trying to get out of the office. What do? They hit the button.
Right.
And then 24, 48 hours on the Monday afterwards, they're kind of following up to figure it out. And, oh my gosh, that money's gone. I get the phone call, can you help us out? Sure. And actually we did. We were able to help out. We were able to work with some of the banks. Of the $6 million, we got $1.2 million back. You all are chuckling. That is such a huge success. You have no idea. You know how much we normally get back? Nothing. So that was a big success. And then I just got one yesterday. I was on the phone with somebody, and their systems were being hacked. And their systems got hacked to the point where their computers have been set up to auto-generate checks to pay invoices. Very efficient, unless it gets hacked. And what the company has done is they've done a great job of doing an internal investigation. They believe it's one of their employees.
Right.
Which, by the way, we, the FBI, really, really like, because you know where they are? They're here.
That's right.
Here in the United States. And then remember what I talked to you at the very beginning? We've got handcuffs. We've got battery. We've got search stuff. We get to use these tools to go get that person. But look, those are just 3 things that have happened for me, and I'm one of 400 agents in the Miami division. Dan, I know, gets at least a dozen of them a week. Our cyber group, who does this full time, we've got 12 people working cybercrime in Miami. The average complaints come in is between 100 and 125 complaints a week. This stuff is going on, and companies need to think about what they're going to do, how they're going to deal with it if it happens, and please keep us as part of your plan.
Go ahead, sir. I think you're.
I was curious, of the ransomware incidents or other thefts essentially that are reported to you, cyber thefts, what would you say is your percentage of ones that actually get attributed and traced back to an individual, an arrest made?
We're pretty good at tracing. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but there's these countries out there, you might have heard of them, some of them might rhyme with Russia, China, Iran, there's some South American countries, some South African countries. Look, yeah, we can trace it all the way back. We can probably even point to an IP address that, oh, yep, it's in this city, or it's even at this house. But I mean, great. The country's not cooperating with us. We're not extraditing those folks, and it's really challenging. Look, when we get the case that's in the United States, I mean, I think there are a lot of computing nerds over there, so I'm sure there's like some kind of celebration, thing that goes up, but it's on the computer screen, so it really doesn't make a mess in the area. But we get excited when we can go get somebody. We truly are, as an organization, very disappointed when we do the work, we trace this, and we find out, oh yeah, there's this beautiful place just outside of Siberia, and we're.
So are you looking at like a 1% success rate, or is it?
I don't know what the numbers are. I really don't, but I can.
But it's rising.
Brian,
Let me tell you
Brian,
that
I have a
it is
question.
rising.
Brian, I have a question, please.
Yes.
One of the things that you said about the FBI was that you're a more reactive organization. But the whole cyber security industry, to my mind, seems to be more reactive.
Mhm.
They're not proactive. What is it going to take for us to become proactive the way we do things? Because the bad guys always seem to be ahead of us. So what's causing this, and why aren't we investing more money as an industry?
I am so glad you asked that question, because that's actually why I'm here.
You put me up to that question.
Yeah. 20 bucks left, and it's all yours. But that's why we're here. This is one of the reasons we come out, and Dan and myself are out, and we're constantly talking to groups like yourselves, where we're telling you, hey, become part of our InfraGard system. Become part of a group and an organization that sole purpose is to educate each other. Share information with the FBI so we can share it with all of you, with the American companies that are out there trying to do the right thing every day, who are suffering 100,000 attacks every week. We know that this is going on, but what we don't know is what's working for the bad guys. If there's something working for the bad guy or bad folks out there, we can share that with you. We'll share that information, and that's what the FBI is trying to do a better job of. We have entire entities inside of our organization that are sharing this information. So we're starting with InfraGard. The larger companies, and I know Dan can talk about some of that stuff if you guys have interest in that afterwards. We are working with our, the private companies in the United States to give them the information, give them some tools, and open up those communications and the ability to share that information with each other. Because just like you all are doing today, right? I'm learning stuff sitting up here about what your risks are. You're sharing it with each other. The more we know about what's going on out there and what bad people are trying to do to us, the better all of you will be prepared for it, and the better we, the FBI, will be prepared to investigate those cases and hopefully find the people that are doing those things and put them in jail.
So Google South Florida InfraGard chapter, and there is a place called membership, and become a member of the InfraGard, so you get access to this kind of information. 2 minutes.
I want to drop something really
Sure,
important.
go ahead.
Social engineering training.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
you mentioned a CEO, somebody high placed, they are flattered when people come to their profile and say nice things. Hey, my wife went to school
Right.
with your wife or whatever.
Happens.
And they can worm their way into your good graces. And that is a people avenue that's not phishing, but it's super, the CEO, CFO, CI, those are the vulnerabilities. Through flattery, through LinkedIn profiles. Don't always know the people you're saying yes to. Try to know them personally. Don't say yes to everybody.
Let me
we
give
are
you just
becoming
one.
the products. We are becoming the products,
Yeah.
right? We are getting targeted.
Let me give you one quick.
1 minute before Selena kills me.
Yeah, just
So
one
you got
quick.
1 minute, Manny.
Yeah, one
and
quick
then-
story, because I think this one in particular is very relevant and it's one that I want you to take home with you. So a CEO at a UK energy firm gets a call from a CEO in Hungary and says, I need you to transfer 220,000 euros to this Hungary supplier. He goes ahead, goes to the CFO, does that, everything's fine. Gets a call from the Hungary organization saying, what are you doing? Why are you transferring money to this account? We don't know anything about this account. It was a deep fake voice. So the CEO was thinking that he was talking to the CEO in Hungary. That's the kind of thing that's going on right now. You know, we talk about deep fake from a video perspective, but voice is very powerful. And this is an individual that's obviously very sophisticated. He's the CEO of an organization, and he transferred 220,000 euros to Hungary, never to be recovered again after that. So don't forget about deepfake and what's happening there, because that is a threat that is going to be imminent for all of us, and we need to be very careful with who we're taking calls from and taking action from.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
ChatGPT,
That's right.
I just read a statistic, and I'm going to get it wrong. 30-something% of its usage is creating hacking
Malware.
scripts.
Yep.
Malware. Absolutely.
Yeah.
malware.
Emails for ransomware, they're producing perfectly grammatical emails with ChatGPT. So the folks that typically take a look at ransomware emails and they say, oh, this is grammatically incorrect, this is a spam. No longer. Now you have to be very watchful.
Thank you, Microsoft.
Yeah.
Mark, you want to?
I think we're good.
Closing?
I think we're good.
Cool. All right. Thanks. Again, go join InfraGard. Some of the things that we talked about over here, I want to assure you, our FBI, Secret Service, they are making a lot of progress. The beauty of blockchain is actually starting to work against these ransomware guys, because we've got farms on which we are actually, our law enforcement agencies are starting to mine Bitcoins, by which they are able to identify where the actual Bitcoin wallet is, which country, and depending upon what activity happens, they can actually get to who owns that Bitcoin wallet. And if by chance it's on the US soil, they can go after it. Colonial Pipeline, I think they recovered pretty much everything except for maybe $200,000 or something like that. So we are getting very good at it, so let's not get very disappointed. I would leave you with 3 things. Make sure you have encryption turned on your laptop. Make sure you're using a VPN, and make sure you're using an MFA. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being a great audience. Doug, in closing.
In closing, I just want to thank this great panel. I mean, Sanjay Deo, Mark Smith, Manny Ramos, Special Agent Brian Waterman. Great panel tonight. Thank you all for being here. Please, on the way out, there are these, call them a goodie bag, right? Please make sure you get one of the blue Oz bags for everybody that's here. We appreciate the fact that you guys took the time to be here to share in this great learning session, and we hope to have the opportunity to speak with you again. Thanks, everybody.